Bob Cusack is the editor-in-chief of The Hill, joining me now. Bob, good to see you.
Hey, Stephanie.
Senator Corker announced he is not running for re-election. Did that essentially liberate him from saying and doing whatever he wants?
Yes, I think it has. I mean, Senator Corker has long been a pragmatist. He uses measured tones. But he is a free agent now, and when Trump goes after him again, Corker, as you mentioned, fired back and very hard. So this feud could complicate both the Iran deal going forward as well as tax reform. Corker does not want to increase the deficit, but there are indications that the tax reform deal could significantly increase the deficit. So remember, if Republicans don't unify, just like health care, only 3 Republican defections can kill a bill in the Senate. So this is a problem for the president.
Right. So the stakes are high, and I want to get into that a little bit later. But first of all, this Twitter feud, this back and forth on whether Trump endorsed, whether Corker asked him to endorse. It's a he said, he said. Do you expect that Republican lawmakers are going to have to take sides in the coming days?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And if you really start to count it up, I mean, Trump has gone after a number of Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell and Jeff Flake and Lisa Murkowski and others, John McCain, of course. So, you know, when you have this kind of tension between the White House and Republican senators, it's tough to get a deal. But this is the way that Trump operates, and I think it's going to continue.
Senator Corker, as you mentioned, is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and there are several high-stakes foreign policy issues right now. Do you think that this rift could have an impact on U.S. foreign policy, and what are the signs of that?
Well, certainly in the short term, it's whether Trump certifies the Iran deal. He has to do this every month or so, every quarter, and he doesn't want to do it in October. So then that could push it to Congress as far as whether Congress pushes for sanctions. Now, I don't think Bob Corker is going to be pushing for sanctions. So Republicans are going to have to decide whether they want to torpedo the Iran deal, because Trump not certifying doesn't technically kill the deal. So that's one issue. Now, also, Corker could make trouble for the White House on nominations to the State Department if he doesn't like a certain nominee. So this is definitely going to be, I think you're going to see, whether it's Corker or McCain, more Republican senators fighting with Trump. Because remember, Steve Bannon wants to primary every Republican who's up for re-election next year, and that's not sitting well with the establishment Republicans. But that's what Bannon and Trump, that's what they like.
Between Corker and McCain and others that have deviated from Trump on both domestic and foreign policy points, is there enough Republican dissent to basically stymie the president's domestic agenda? And you bring up tax reform being a priority now for the president. We're also talking about immigration. How much of an effect could these dissenting voices have on his domestic agenda?
I think we've seen a lot of it already on health care in particular. John McCain was the one who killed the bill twice, and he's had a very testy relationship with Trump. So I think this continues, and that's why Mitch McConnell wants Trump to stop using Twitter, but that's never going to happen. So I do think that this is part of the reason why the Trump agenda, legislative agenda, has not succeeded. And if they don't get tax cuts, that would be extremely embarrassing for the Republican Party, because maybe some Republicans say, hey, health care is not our strong suit, but tax cuts is, and that's why we must get a deal. But it's going to be very difficult to get a bill passed through both chambers and to Trump's desk, especially when Republicans are fighting one another.
And they have such a slim majority in the Senate. And you talked about Corker, his specific stance on tax reform. He doesn't seem afraid to buck the president on social media. When it comes to tax reform, we know that Corker has stated he's not happy that the president's tax reform plan raises potentially the national deficit.
Yeah, I mean, when you think back to the large tax cuts of the past, and certainly the last big one was President George W. Bush in 2001, when we had surpluses then. That was before 9/11. So it was relatively easy, compared to now certainly, to pass a big tax cut plan where people got checks in the mail. Very politically astute back then. This time it's difficult. The debt has hit $20 trillion, and there are a number of Republicans who want to have that number go down, not up. And that's when, if you have a big tax cut, you are going to have, now Republicans say they're going to pay for themselves in growth, but critics say that those estimations of growth are just unrealistic.
Right. Some Republicans say that, and Corker,
yes,
I don't know, is one of them, and
right,
he is a key vote. Meanwhile, as you know, the president Sunday gave Congress his list of demands in exchange for a deal with Democrats to protect the so-called Dreamers. You remember that so-called deal. Measures the president wants include the border wall, he promised during the campaign, hiring 10,000 ICE agents, and tougher laws for those seeking asylum. Bob, do you think this is just a starting bid for negotiations, or is this a hard line by the president?
I definitely think this is a starting bid, Stephanie. Remember, the president took the wall off the table, at least in the short term, saying we can get it done eventually. But with the Dreamers, that he would get border enforcement, but not the wall. Now they're putting the wall back on, as well as other things that are just not going to pass, don't have the votes to pass Congress. So this is, I think, a negotiation. And the Democrats are doing it too. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, after meeting with the president and having a verbal type of deal, also penned an op-ed saying we need a Clean Dream Act, and that's also doesn't have the votes to pass, and certainly Republican leaders aren't going to bring a Dream Act to the floor without getting any kind of border concession. So I think this is the beginning of a very tense negotiation that some are thinking could pass in December with the government funding deal, that it has to be attached to something. However, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get a deal on immigration when both the left and the right are asking for a lot.
Just a month ago, we were talking about this, what looked like a compromise on the Dreamers with the Democrats, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were out in the media touting this. Was it premature for the Democrats to tout their compromise with Trump, and did they in some way shoot themselves in the foot?
I think they wanted to put it out there that Trump had agreed to this because they thought it was, I mean, they were surprised by it, certainly. But I do think that with Trump, and I've talked to both Republicans and Democrats, is that you can strike a deal with him, but they can't trust him that the deal is going to be in place the following day. So but the problem for Democrats, and specifically Schumer and Pelosi, is that immigration activists, at least some of them, the Dreamers is not enough. First of all, they don't want anything, they don't want border security tied to the DREAM Act, and they don't just want the DREAM Act. They want also family members to be involved. So, and that's just something that can't pass a Republican Congress, period.
All right, before I let you go, to presidential politics and football. The president is not only defending Vice President Mike Pence for his early exit from a Colts game, but saying he told the vice president to do it. This is over, of course, players kneeling for the national anthem. What do you make of this whole display, and why does the White House continue to insert itself into this debate?
Trump, I think, I mean, this plays well to his base. I mean, I know some Trump supporters who did not watch football yesterday. So this is working. The NFL has taken some hits if you look at the polls, and I think this is personal for Trump. And obviously, Pence knew what he was going to do. He was going to get there. He's not going to stay for the entire game. They knew they were going to get there and then leave. And I'm sure it played well with the president, especially if Trump told him to do it. Pence has been loyal. I think this is a problem for the NFL. It doesn't want to be feuding with the president, but at the same time, it has to defend its players and their right to express themselves. So this is going to go on, I think, for the entire season. And remember, the NBA season is starting soon, so that's going to be another thing to watch.
White House versus professional sports. Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.